Brian Granse released his first recording in January 2001 in Carbondale, Illinois. He has been performing, writing, and recording for nearly 20 years. He has called Portland, Oregon home since 2007. And we're very happy to have him presenting his latest release, Broken Glass, here on KBOO. When did you write Broken Glass?
I wrote Broken Glass in the summer of 2020 after George Floyd was murdered and the protests were heating up in Portland. And I was overwhelmed at sort of seeing the boiling point where people had just so clearly had enough. The video of Floyd was so horrifying and slow. And I think one of the strongest impressions for me was all that time to turn back. Derek Chauvin had so much time to change the course, and George Floyd had so much time to contemplate his fate, impending death. And I felt like it was such an obvious example of racism and racism killing this man.
What were you trying to convey when you wrote it?
When I wrote Broken Glass, I tried to capture the moment. I wanted to honor Floyd by using his story and the story of public outrage and support. And here was this sign that a large part of this city and really the entire world saw Floyd's death as an act of murder and racism and wanted justice. And I wanted justice for Floyd, but it wasn't just about Floyd. It was about a whole package of frustrations and outrage that people of color are facing on a daily basis. And so I was also very aware that it went way beyond the murder of George Floyd.
What is your songwriting method like?
When I write any song, I'm trying to capture the emotions. And so it's like trying to scoop up these feelings I have about a situation or an event and pack them into a container that is a song. The song is the vessel. And within that, I'm always hoping to not only capture emotion, but get some sort of message in there. And in this song, obviously at the peak of that for me was that Floyd was murdered. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't just a byproduct of negligence. And then the next piece beyond that Chauvin was racist and committed a racist murder. And why do both of those matter so much in the big picture? I think it's about institutional racism and that it's real and prevalent and undeniable.
How do you feel about racism in general?
One of the overwhelming feelings I had throughout this is that white people need to take a step back and let Black voices and Black minds guide the path forward and still show support and solidarity. So be there, but don't grab the mic. Be there, but don't take over each time. And give money to organizations out there that are getting the job done.
How can we confront racism?
When a racist monument gets taken down, we can't cling to that. We can't celebrate colonialists and slave owners and turn a blind eye to the trauma and the pain they inflicted. And I think what's ironic about that is, from my view, that is unfiltering history when we place focus on those atrocities that are committed. And yet the fear of many white people is that it's twisting history or erasing it. And so I think we can preserve elements of history for the sake of knowledge without having 10-foot bronze sculptures that celebrate colonialists and slave owners and people that inflicted a lot of damage and trauma on people of color.
Do you think protests are effective?
As the protests were heating up here in Portland, it was really hard to know where the escalation might stop. There was really no forecasting the extent of it all. Federal agents came in, which escalated things even further, and it was a real attention getter. All of our eyes were on it, and that is a way to honor George Floyd's death, and that is a component of justice, is calling attention to this. And so I think that people will get distracted by condemning acts of violence, and especially when it's directed mostly at property. And yes, that has real tangible impacts on people, and that has to be recognized. But I think also at the same time, hearing the message. Why is there violence? What is being communicated? What are the emotions that led to that violence? And why are those emotions there? You start to trace it backwards, and the message that's being communicated through that deserves attention.
What is the intent of the song?
My intent with this song is to try to honor George Floyd and those who died at the hands of police before and since Floyd's murder. I'm also looking forward, acknowledging that there's widespread support to stop this, and that we all have a civic duty to keep this momentum and make that happen, make those changes.
I found the cover of the song interesting. What was the creative process for it?
The album art ended up taking more time than I would have ever thought. For an album cover that's a simple message with written text on a solid background. It was a real opportunity to kind of condense the message of the song and leave the listener with a takeaway, but not just a takeaway, also an attention getter in front of experiencing the song. And so I wanted to get that right, so to speak. There ended up being this huge back and forth because the distributor required that the album cover feature the song title in the most prominent way. So in short, even though I wrote this song and called it Broken Glass, I didn't have the words Broken Glass on the album cover. And so the streaming platform said, no, you cannot do that. And so after a lot of back and forth and attempts by me to kind of work around that, I made the decision to change the song title to all of the words that are on the album cover, which makes for a very long title. So now, officially, according to all the streaming platforms, the song is called George Floyd Was Killed by Racism. The man who killed him pinned his neck to the ground for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. The length of this song: reflect, remember, stand against racism. And the reason that the song title is that is because they wouldn't allow this album cover without it. And I thought that the album cover was an important part of the message. And so one of the benefits to this is that message that's on the cover also scrolls across. When someone is listening, that's the title that shows up.
What is the message on the artwork?
So I had a few key goals with the album cover in terms of the message to pass along. And at the very top of that was absolutely that George Floyd was killed by racism. And then after that everyone needs to reflect on this if we're going to actually change it. And then the artwork itself it's meant to spark curiosity. So it's a written message on a bright yellow background. And for most listeners, that's going to be the size of a little fingernail on a phone. And so hopefully the color and the text makes a listener curious if this song pops up on a random playlist algorithm. And they'll be curious and they'll look at that message, even if they don't listen to the song, even if they don't like the song, there is that message to experience regardless.
Do you have something to say about the length of the song?
Broken Glass is a long song. It's 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And that, of course, became the official time that we were all made aware of during Derek Chauvin's trial. That's the amount of time that George Floyd was held to the ground and unable to breathe. And so back to this idea of it being a long song, listening to a 9 minute and 29 second song is a long experience. Most people are going to probably skip ahead and not listen to that all the way through. And I do the same thing when I'm listening to songs. So, and that's kind of the point, is that 9 minutes and 29 seconds is a very long time. And that's how much time George Floyd experienced not being able to breathe and being aware that death was coming. And that's horrifying. It's also how much time Derek Chauvin and other officers had to change their course. And that's unacceptable. So the long outro is a chance to back off from the aggressive vocals and voice and just kind of let the listener sit with it if they so choose. And even the silence at the end of the song is intentional. There's maybe 10 seconds at the end that's just silence. And my thinking was that, before whatever streaming service someone hears it on launches to another track, it just gives the listener a moment, and maybe they even look down at their phone to say, wait, why is this song still going? And there's that message on a yellow background again, bright and attention getting. And it's one more time to sort of let that sink in.
Could you please explain the lyrics of the song?
The opening verse of the song says, "Broken glass on the avenue, do you hear it now? Is it coming through?" And, the marches, the peaceful protests, the destructive acts, they are a message. They are a signal. People have been calling for changes throughout the history of the United States. Is it going to stick this time? Is it coming through? Early in the song, I say the line, "Throw every flame, 'cause walking that southern bridge already did what it's going to do." Business owners, they saw their dreams shattered in some cases during the destruction that occurred during some of the protests. And it's important to acknowledge that the destruction of property had a very real negative impact on some people. But this line isn't exploring that. This line is meant to pose a question. And that is, have we seen the limitations of what the civil rights movement of the 1960s and beyond can achieve? And what's next? It's meant to reference the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. And I'm basically exercising the thought that maybe that kind of approach has already achieved what it can. Maybe it already did what it's going to do. So if people want to be angry and aggressive and maybe destructive and pushing for higher degrees of progress, I can understand that. I don't personally take that approach, but at the same time, who am I to judge it? As a white, middle-aged, middle-class male, I experience the daily personal benefits of a system that is built and maintained to benefit me. Violence and destruction can upset that system and can negatively impact my lifestyle, my health insurance benefits or access to schools and 401ks, etc. So I think I'm going to be pretty biased under these circumstances, and I think it's common for white folks, including conservatives, moderates, progressives, everybody, to feel like, yeah, let's change this, but can we do it calmly and slowly without me having to surrender any of my privilege? There's no urgency in that tone, but for people of color, there's only been urgency, and the systems here have not been changed in ways that meet that urgency. In both choruses of the song, I reference the American dream kind of in two distinctly different ways. And so, the first time I say this American dream is going to push it all to change. And so I feel like, the democratic framework of the U.S. technically leaves the opportunity for change to be made through the will of people and people's voices. And to me, that means that the American dream can look like something different than we've known, something that's more inclusive, or something that just is inclusive. It's a vision that can evolve, and to me, it's hope. It's hope that we can get there. But later in the song, I modify that a bit and say that the American dream is going to push itself out of the way, and that's in the second chorus. And the reason I say that the American dream is going to push itself out of the way is, I feel like the exclusive version of the American dream, where systems are built to hold down people of color, it can't sustain itself because it lacks moral integrity. It's exposing itself, and it's slowly being shoved aside in favor of an inclusive society. The progress on that front is immense over the past century, which is undeniable. It's an undeniable trend. And then I also would say it can't be an excuse to back off, but it does point to this idea that America is a changing society, and it points to hope. So in the final verse of the song, I say, "It's time to be heard for the dead without words. I wish I could run back time and make it right with you. But a mother's fear, can we make it rest? It never should have been, but we made it bloom." And I think what I'm getting at here is that we can't help those who have been killed, and I wish we could, but we can honor them by making changes in society. And so then the second line focuses on the relationship between mother and child. George Floyd called out to his mother when he knew he was dying and being killed. And this is a common phenomenon on battlefields and war and in other traumatic events where people know they are dying. the mother and child bond is this core of human existence. And Black mothers fear that their children are going to be killed in the American system. And as a white parent, I'll never know what that's like. I will never ponder whether or not a routine traffic stop will end in my child's death, or whether my child might be shot by police while holding a toy gun. And so for those of us with privilege and power, this is on us. We are part of a system that feeds that fear that a mother holds every day about her Black child, and that reality that reinforces that fear, that says that fear is legitimate and worth fearing. And we are responsible for changing that.
Thank you very much, Brian. With you, Broken Glass by Brian Granse.